Hello, and welcome to the So Emotional podcast. Here on the cast, we discuss everything emotions through the lens of attachment, the nervous system, and internal parts work. We're a little irreverent and like to have fun exploring the emotional issues and dynamics that interest us. So come along and hang out. Let's explore the fascinating lands of emotions.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the So Emotional podcast. I am your host, Angela Wetzel with Epic Initiator Coaching. This is Nick Carl with the Safe Anchor Somatic Coaching. And today we have a very special guest, Vanessa Grace. She is the founder of Soul Amplified, a codependency coach and general purveyor of awesomeness, which it actually says that in her email, which I love. And here on the podcast, our goal is always to remove the stigma and enigma around the emotional journey. And since Vanessa is an expert at codependency, and she and I actually met doing a Crush Your Codependency summit, which she hosted, and we geeked out all day on codependence, I feel like we're going to have a great conversation. And so we're just going to dive in.
Yay! I'm so excited to be here.
Reunited.
We did. We made it happen.
Yeah,
we did totally geek out on codependence that day.
Really did. Yeah, we got really excited. And I don't know if everyone else watching shared our enthusiasm or knew what the fuck we were going on about, but I had a good time.
Yeah, you were amazing. You had so much good content for people, and they were eating it up. People that I heard from later who had listened to it.
Okay.
Yeah, they were really loving it.
Thank you. Yeah. I really enjoyed that. So thank you.
So Vanessa, for me,
yeah.
will you tell me and our audience how you got into the emotional game? When did you figure out that this was important shit? You wanted to learn more about it and figure it out and educate yourself. How did that come about?
Oh, how far back do you want me to go?
Well, I don't know. I mean, the arc. When does it spark your interest?
Well, maybe major epiphany or super rock bottom.
I mean,
desperation.
Okay, I've always been a person who helped others. My dad would call me a social butterfly, and I went straight into college after high school and went into social work and got my master's degree in social work. Almost went straight through, did a little bit of a break to, work for a couple of years, blah, blah, blah. So I did the path, thinking that along the way, I was one of the few people in social work who was just fine. So kind of my turning point happens when I go to therapy because I'm feeling stressed out about life. There's a lot of stuff going on. We're trying to buy a house. At this point, I've started a private practice as a therapist. And my therapist tells me, hey, it might be good if you go to our codependency group. And I kind of went what the fuck? What? And so that was a major turning point because I went to it kind of scared shitless that something was wrong with me or not wanting to believe that. And guess what? My family wasn't just fine. I mean, there was a lot of love and blah, 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 all the good things that you want. But when my dad would get mad, guess what? Everyone was quiet and went to their own corner. So when the worst things that would happen in my life would happen, there was no one there to comfort me, which I now know is really, really the opposite of what you want for good nervous system stuff. So it's basically left alone to figure out how to handle the stressful moments, and I recognize as a person who's worked in the helping field for this many years, that the stuff I experienced isn't the worst stuff in the world, but it's the stuff that I experienced. And it was rough for my nervous system. And so now I can look back at all of these different moments and reinterpret them and go, God, I was being so codependent right there. And because I'd already started a business, a therapy business, and then now I was learning about codependency. And then at the same time, I was learning about psychology and spirituality and money kind of all at the same time. So I was going through this major up level and all these different areas in my life. I was hey, maybe I could make money teaching people about codependency. And so then I made my program, the People Pleaser Recovery Roadmap, that was a passive, you buy the program, you watch the videos thing.
Right.
and made that to help other people. And then that's kind of what like started Soul Amplified. And a lot of my own personal growth was actually part of the spiritual awakening that was going on behind the scenes of all of this. And I had Soul Amplified for a little while before I felt comfortable incorporating spirituality into how I worked with people about codependency. And before I added in actual coaching, rather than it just being the program. So it's like this evolution of as I grew spiritually and understanding my family stuff better and understanding myself better and being able to reveal who I truly was on a deeper level more to myself and the people around me, then I was able to share that more through my business and be more and more authentic. And I'm still doing that like today and right now. I'm trying to shed more shit and become more authentic with what I'm sharing. So that's like, I don't know, that's like my beginner answer.
That was great. That was fantastic. That's what I wanted.
Yeah.
You know, Vanessa, what I remember why I got so excited about you is because you were a therapist and we were both able to really geek out on codependence, because I realized a lot of therapists don't know about codependence.
Oh, fuck, I didn't.
And it's,
oh my God, I didn't.
When I started to learn that, it like scared the shit out of me, because I was like, what the fuck? And my pathway like into healing was learning about codependence really early on. And then I like went to therapy. So I like did all these things kind of anyway, I did not plan to be a coach of any kind. I was like, fuck that, whatever.
No one plans to be a coach.
Yeah, I didn't. I was like
a fucking calling or something.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. So I didn't plan that, but when you were telling your story, I was like remembering, because at the time I had consulted with quite a few therapists. And so I would mention codependence and things like that. And they were like, I don't know what that is. And I'm like,
Yeah. So I did actually learn about it back in college, but it was more like we talked about it in like one class during one day, or maybe there was like a section on it, which really wasn't enough because it was scratching the surface. And it was the definition of codependency that kind of the word kind of sounds like, but it's actually like a gajillion different things underneath, as you know, and it's way more complicated than that. And
yeah,
you could be codependent and not know it, because all the signs would look invisible to you, and all the reasons why you're codependent could be you're just being nice to somebody and it's part of your moral code, and it's just important to put other people first, and all these things that our society supports and that your family supports as part of your family values. And you could be like totally trashing where you want to be in life with your goals and your self-care without even realizing it, thinking that you're on the right path, but you're actually codependent. Sabotaging yourself.
Like kind of like the your coping strategies being like medicine, but you haven't necessarily got to that point where you are like realizing that it's become poison.
Yes. I look back at therapy clients that I would work with, mostly women or teenagers, and I think to myself now, gosh, if I would have so much more to help that woman with now. We burned out, like we didn't know what to work on anymore, so they switched therapists because I didn't know what codependency was. That was actually the crux of their issue. You know, I just hadn't developed enough as a person and as a therapist to be able to help them. And it's fine if you need to move on with your therapist, like, yes, do it. Don't stay with someone forever just because they know your story. Move on when it's time to move on, because everyone is not meant to be on our path, personally or professionally, our entire life. Sometimes they're just here to get us a certain distance, and then that little part of our soul contract is done, and then we're on to the next person, the next way of interacting, whatever.
Yeah.
Right. So I need a little bit of help. So cool. I've watched plenty of Pia Melody. You know, I have a bunch of attachment shit in my head. I don't suffer for lack of information jammed in my skull.
I think we also did a podcast on codependence too.
But still, the term codependence, I feel like it's confusing.
It is. It's the worst word ever for what it actually is. It is so.
Maybe that's what it is. Maybe that's what it is, because my brain does that. Like just the actual words. You know,
it's the word. Like, the word makes it sound like you're not capable of being a person who makes independent decisions, And while that is one portion of it, that is
Right.
very lacking in a full description.
So can you give me a little bit of like,
Yes.
just a,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'll give you the breakdown. So really, codependency at its crux is I'm going to sacrifice something that I need for myself to give you what you need in hopes that you will love me, or that you will give me some basic human need that I have. And this is mostly subconscious, unaware, underneath the surface. It always comes as a survival skill from childhood circumstances. Absolutely. And the circumstances are basically the people that primarily raised you weren't fully adulting. And by that, I mean, like, if somebody was an alcoholic, if somebody had a mental health condition that wasn't being managed, if someone has a medical condition that wasn't being managed, or it's managed, but it's so severe that, like, not everyone can get to your needs as the kid, or there's things in life that aren't managed. And if the adults in the home don't have the capacity to just like take care of their own emotions, if they just put their emotions out there, if they use their protectors, their unidentified protectors to manage life, and those happen to be negative, and then you're wandering around as the kid trying to like make things make sense. Well, what do kids do when something doesn't make sense? It must be my fault. I must have to take care of it. And you only feel warm to me if I act a certain way, so I always act that way so I can get the warmth, that feeling of warmth that I need from you. And so it basically creates this people-pleasing scenario, a doormat scenario, this long-standing like, oh, this is my goal in life, and I'm going to go do this goal, but you never considered what you wanted independently. So it looks like, oh, I'm part of the family business. Oh, my family's so proud of me. But then, like, when you're 30, you're like not happy, and you're like, did I ever really want any of this? And then you're like, fuck, I didn't. I just played the game. And so it's insidious, and it's really invisible. And on the surface, it looks like 50 different things, but at the core, it can be one thing. And not everyone with these issues is codependent. And not everyone who's done people-pleasing means that they're codependent. It means they have people-pleasing sometimes, which a lot of us do. But that's kind of like the description that I give to people to help them understand where it can come from. So if you have parents that were like that, you likely have codependent traits.
Right. And I can see like the enmeshment of it, because all that is established at such a young age, and it's just practiced and baked into the pie at such a deep level that fast forward 25 years or whatever, it's like, no, this is just who I am. And it's like, well,
Yes.
Right.
And I've always been the helper. I've always been the one, but I've always been the one who explained my parents to each other, because I would observe them having a conflict, just like not getting it, like saying things back and forth, and I could so easily understand what both of them were saying as a child under 10. And I was like, I don't get why you don't get what the other one is saying. And I would say, Mom, Dad is saying this. Dad is saying that. Why the F was I doing that? Why was I understanding them better than they could understand what the other one was saying? And so it was just like always, I was very practiced at seeing it. And so it was just natural to me.
So they also call that parentification, right?
Yes.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. There's so many, there's like so many different ways to describe like codependence. Like I always view it as these like co-protective strategies. It's like that younger child, like wounded part of you that thinks you can't survive something. So you like give up something of yourself to get that protection, and vice versa. So it could be like covering someone to protect them from consequences, because if they're good, then you're good. So it's like anything that it just gets really tangled. Like who's responsible for what, and like, you're responsible for my feelings, I'm responsible for your feelings. It's like,
so no one's responsible for themselves.
Yeah. And there's like boundary stuff where you don't know what boundaries are, or like, either too spongy, too porous, or super rigid. Like there's just a million different. So, you know, basically if you're suffering in some way, you probably have some kind of codependent traits or behaviors.
I mean, deep truth moment. I kind of see it everywhere I go.
Yeah, once you see
I'm
it,
like, oh, okay, that's a codependent behavior. That's codependent behavior. Like I'm just living my life and I see it in how people are acting. Not saying that they are, but it's a behavior that falls underneath.
Right. How
you know,
would
my
you,
definition, my umbrella of it.
how would you distinguish the difference between someone that has some codependent behaviors and a person who is like that you would label as a codependent?
I'm not sure I've ever distinguished this before, so you're making my brain function at a higher level. So I think of codependence as on a continuum anyway.
Yeah.
It's more like people-pleasing tendencies and other things at one end, and then kind of like eking towards full-blown at the other. So I don't feel like there's a decisive line. I think it's almost like, how frequently are you doing the behaviors that have consequences for you that are increasingly negative? And maybe you don't do many of the behaviors, but the ones that you do really impact you. And it's especially true when people are in relationships with people that are unhealthy for them, or they're constantly like caretaking that other person, giving them money, kind of they get swallowed up by the other person's life. People who continuously date alcoholics or addicts, or people who are kind of like jobless, but then expect you to take care of them. Like if you're in those kinds of situations, well, you're going to be more likely to be codependent because now you're in adult codependent relationships. So I guess my answer is it depends on how much it's affecting your life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which I know isn't super clear, but did you
I
know
always like
that?
I like to think about solar systems, you know, and it's like when you roll around the solar system, depending on what body is close to you, will affect you by the gravity. So it's like, what's my central sun, you know, or like how many times in the year am I affected by that, you know, body that's pulling in on me, you know?
Yeah, I think that's really true. Like family systems can kind of activate it, or people that your nervous system is reminded of something, like that's like the sun, you know, like, oh, my nervous system remembers this, and this is how my nervous system is primed to respond when I am near this kind of a situation. So I slip into these behaviors that I'm totally unaware of. Yeah, that's a really good analogy. I love it.
It's a great nuance. Yeah, there.
Yeah.
And you answered it how I would have said. I would have said it's like attachment, you know, if someone has insecure attachment, they're codependent already. Like there's a lot of overlap. There's overlap, right? But it is like a spectrum. So you can have a secure person, and that secure person will still experience some anxious and avoidant tendencies, but it's like they are mostly exhibiting secure, healthy behaviors. And it's kind of the same thing, I would say, for like someone who's having codependent behaviors. You may have a few, but overall you're really good, you're solid. And it's maybe over time you'll have more clarity and be like, oh, that's not super healthy, or I don't want to do that anymore. And then you'll just stop. But someone who has more unhealthy behaviors, like it's definitely going to negatively impact their life. It's going to be way more obvious. And I think there's probably some people that are kind of teetering on the edge of something or in the middle, and they're suffering, but they don't really know why. And that's because I think they're like right on that edge where it's like they're getting by, but then there's lots of awful shit and they're like not knowing what to do. Or, you know, I would just say at that point, maybe just not knowing the difference between their ass and a hole in the ground, which is like how I was in my marriage. Like I didn't know what the fuck was going on. I wasn't even feeling my feelings. I would have like emotional meltdowns like every few months. And I thought that I was feeling because I was an actress. I was like, of course I feel everything, but it was like pure chaos. So
yeah. Feeling feelings is a really big thing that I talk about. Like, it doesn't even matter what part of my career I've been in or what I've been focusing on. I just feel like that's the place I start with everybody that I work with, is figuring out Like what's their emotional language? What's their ability to allow themselves to feel? How long can they feel something? Can they identify their feeling? Can they point out where it is somatically in their body, where they physically feel it? Do they even know that emotions can be in their body and that that's a signal that you're having an emotion? You know, just like working with people to get them to the place where they can just know what the emotion is and let themselves feel it. So much work just goes into that.
Yeah. And that, you know, that can be a really tricky topic, because if you have trauma or triggers specifically around emotion, and many people do, like every single emotion that exists, like you could have been smiling and have a parent that's like, I will fucking smack that smile off your face, and have trauma around feeling joy or showing happiness. Or you, at any point, if you had like your parents, you watched them pretty much manipulate or abuse each other with their emotions, emotional abuse, then you might have feelings about having feelings, period. And that kind of affects your own relationship to your own emotions. And it can be a challenge to have a way in, period.
Yeah. I worked with teenagers for a long part in my career, and I definitely worked with them a lot. I mean, it's like an insane period in everyone's life, teenagehood. But
so tell me a little bit more about that and why you started.
So that's where I actually started my career, was with teenagers. I had an internship with teenagers at like a facility, and I just discovered that I really enjoyed working with them. My formula was just to kind of be goofy and allow myself to be observed doing something stupid. And then the kids would talk to you about things that didn't matter. And then they would talk to you about things that did matter. And you just had to be there and listen long enough so they would talk to you about the things that mattered. And that was my formula, like the whole time I worked with teenagers, even as I added other skills. It was just be goofy, be real, don't bullshit them. I just really enjoyed them for a long time.
Yeah. What was your experience of, like, I guess, like developmentally, and maybe because like now my brain's going to like parts work, and how at different ages there's different like developmental or maybe protectors or strategies that probably show up that are likely more associated with certain developmental stages. Does that make sense? What I'm asking?
No, because I didn't even know parts work existed when I was doing work with teenagers. And so you're asking me something that I never used when I was like working with them.
Well, I guess really my question.
Maybe I would think of it maybe more as like inner child, or just like the parts. And I guess, I didn't know the terminology parts work when I was working with teenagers though.
Yeah. I guess my question is like, thematically or overarching, was there a certain energetic flavor of their like resistance, or how they showed up, or what that looked like? Or
I didn't get a lot of resistance. I didn't get a lot of resistance because of the way that I worked. And the ones that ended up feeling like resistant in terms of, because I had social work jobs, and I had like an agency therapy job that was also like agency social work. And then I had my own private practice where I was seeing them. And like everyone was kind of working with me voluntarily. So there was no one that was like their parents made them come and they didn't like working with me. Those people never stayed. And the job where I was like social worker plus therapist, and that was an agency job in a school. It was like the kids were coming to me because I was on site and I was a listener. And so they were voluntarily with me, and it was a small town. So then their friends would know about me, and then their friends would want to work with me or somebody that was also on the same team as me. So I didn't have a lot of, I don't want to fucking be here. I was like, okay, then I'm just going to start my formula and it's going to work. And sometimes it didn't, and then they would leave. So their parents would pull them out or whatever.
Vanessa, back into what you said about the emotional acuity, or somebody's emotional sort of like IQ, or sort of what they bring to the table, what they can actually experience of themselves. You mentioned that that's kind of like a 101 or a place that you have to start. How important is it for people to have like some sort of like I guess I don't know what to call it. I know emotions are important, but like how much of that sensation of being able to place things, being able to feel things, like how and why is that so important to the process that you do to like work with people?
I think it's because I kind of have this perception that working through your stuff involves experiencing emotions. And if you
Right.
can't let yourself feel them, you're not going to be able to get very far. And I've kind of always felt that way. It was never like a theory that somebody gave me and told me I had to adhere to. It was just like what I felt was true for me. But also,
Right.
emotions are such a huge part of myself that I think maybe I don't know how to work with somebody if they flat out don't want to learn about emotions or don't have emotional intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
Like I kind of get stuck. I've also discovered, and this is partly why I don't have a therapy practice anymore. I partly discovered that I didn't really know how to work with people who didn't believe that humans have souls. Like sometimes when I was in a tough moment, in a therapy moment, I would bring up like, well, what do you believe about the other side? And like putting it in frame of reference for what they believe, and then bringing what they believe into the room about religion or spirituality. And I always would get stuck with the people who didn't have any belief system, that thought we just died and went to dust, and I didn't know what to do with them. At that point it was like I was stuck and I didn't know how to get out. And so I think
Right.
emotions are kind of the same thing for me. Like if
Sure.
you don't want to feel your emotions and you're not willing to learn about it, like I can do some workaround stuff, but if you're like I kind of don't know what to do, because I'm such an empath and I feel so much and I feel so frequently and I feel with such depth. um I think that's because that's the way I process things, to be able to
Right.
relate. Maybe that's such a good question.
Well, it's something I've been like thinking about lately because my practice essentially all that it is like we're just going to sit here and we're just going to feel emotions. And whatever comes up, the frustration, it's like, no, just feel the frustration. Oh, you're feeling okay, be with that, right? Try to get the ball
Mm-hmm.
moving. And it's just interesting to run into some people who are like maybe a little bit opposed, or they just are like it's just not seeing or uh, intuiting like the actual value in paying attention and to being in these uncomfortable places. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I have my own relationship that I came to, which was a very much an aha moment. Like, oh my God, like, like the image that came to my head when I finally was brought through some really good therapy face to face with this. It was like turning around and realizing that I had like it was a great lake in my backyard was the image in my head of like, oh, oh, this is why I'm bent out of shape. This makes a lot of sense, actually. I have all this shit that needs to come through that's been completely repressed. And
Mm-hmm.
like, this is the reason that, or one of the big reasons I am how and why I am, you know? And so it makes a lot of sense to me now, but I'm working in my own head and in my own way to like, be able to communicate more fully, like, here's why it's so important. I know it's sort of like part of the pantheon, it's part of the pie, it's a big part of the pie, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then there's also the whole, and so in my practice it's mostly like, no, we just feel it. It's expression is like, that's all we're going to do is try to do expression. But then there's like the practice of sort of getting out of enmeshment. And it's like understanding that just because you have an emotion doesn't mean that you got to go with the emotion. Like, you still have to have some autonomy from these things. And so in certain situations we can have like a locus of control there, which is kind of a weird balance, because it's like you want to let things come through, you want to feel everything, you want to just have emotions, but also we want to find some place maybe of like more balance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so
Balance
it's
and
not making
control and
choices for
locus.
you.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Or making you feel, out, like super unsafe, like you're out of your window of tolerance.
Right. You're victimized by.
Yes, that's a great way to put it. Yes, exactly.
I understand the difficulty in navigating or being new to navigating the emotional stuff, because I remember when I first realized I wasn't feeling, and so this was, how many years ago? Like, I was reading Dr. David Hawkins' Letting Go, The Pathway to Surrender. And in that book, it's really, he's really teaching you how to like somatically experience your emotions, to just feel them and be with them and follow them. And that was like one of my early exposures. And I don't even know how I found that book or stumbled across it, but I was practicing doing that. And that was a way in. And I started to realize that all of my emotions, like I could see that they were vibrationally, energetically linked, because I would have memories that would come up as I would feel and process a certain emotion in my, like a feeling sensation in my body. I would have all these memories that were related to that. And it was like, they were all layered. And it would be like, if it was anger, it was almost like I was tuning into the anger frequency. And then I would be like, oh, that time I wanted to punch that person in the throat. And the time that like, I got into a fight with this person and I wanted to call her a bitch, or, all these like different things would come up. And I was like, damn. And I would just watch them all together and it would be different emotions. But I also remember prior to really like allowing myself to sit and feel, I was really afraid that I would like get swallowed completely by the emotions, or I would go down and I would never come back up. And so it's like, yeah, at that time, like this was really early on in my journey, and I had no idea about parts or different, inner child. I don't even think I had words for that or even thoughts necessarily. So I was doing a lot of experimentation with just different things like Course in Miracles and Abraham Hicks and kind of a more like spiritual thing that started. But then I was also learning about codependency, and I was literally just randomly finding things were finding me. I was finding them. I didn't know what the fuck I was doing, but I was starting to feel and release a lot of things. But like, yeah, I feel like I'm kind of similar to you where like, and at the same time, Nick, like I'm thinking about your question, like making the case for like wanting to feel your feelings. Like when I think about it, from let's say a masculine energy standpoint, and when I think about masculine and feminine energy, let me see if I can pull off what the fuck I'm trying to say here, because I don't have a lot of
We're going to find out.
Okay. So because I was having this conversation with a client earlier where I was thinking about like the spectrum of like masculine to feminine energy. Like, let's say we have a very masculine person that has almost like not very much feminine energy. And so I'm like, to me, that's like a wine glass that's empty. There's no wine in it. It's like beautiful. It has structure, but like, where's the juice? Like, where's the Jesus juice, right? It's like, you want to have a party, like get some fucking wine. And so I think about like, if you have consciousness with nothing to witness, then you're alone. It's like Adam's alone in the garden. So we want masculine energy. We want consciousness and solutions and structure and all of that. And we want that to be paired with chaos. Like chaos needs some structure to flow into, to be given like a more specific form. I'm not asking a question. I'm just going on some kind of rant, but I guess and maybe I'm wrong.
Chaos is terrifying. You're going to wash us away. You're going to smother us with your chaos.
Right. But like the way that I view that is like, when we're talking about this, we're talking about extreme polarities here. So if you have masculine energy with very little or almost no feminine energy influence, like I view that person as not being in energetic flow. And like Vanessa, you have the yin yang behind you. Like we are whole beings. Like you cannot separate masculine from feminine energy. We're actually one, right? So I would view someone that was so entirely in their masculine and not experiencing any of that feminine energy, the actual emotion, as wounded. And that is maybe at this point, like maybe this is a judgment, but I'm also thinking that the woman or person that has so much feminine energy without any of the masculine integration is also highly wounded on the other side. And what they desperately need is each other to find that balance.
Did you know that codependency is an expression of the wounded feminine?
I don't
Explain.
know if I would have. I know that like the waiting shit is wounded feminine. I know that flaky, wishy-washy shit is wounded feminine. I don't know that I would ever just be like, codependence is an expression of the wounded feminine, but I'm interested to hear more. Like, I don't know that I've gone that pathway in my brain with it. Unless
So
I have, and I made like a slide on it one time and I forgot.
What did you say, Nick? Because I heard Angela, but not you.
Oh, I just explain.
Explain. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And you are the perfect example of masculine and feminine right now, because she said a bunch of things and you said one thing, and that made me laugh as well.
Yeah.
Just basically that the wounded, okay, so the feminine wants to be filled up, the feminine wants to be full of things, but the feminine also wants love. She wants just to radiate, and she wants to be loved for exactly who she is. And again, okay, childhood stuff. So if a woman does not experience just being cherished for exactly who she is and her divine feminine as a child, then she's chasing that her entire life. And one of the ways that you chase that is by sacrificing yourself to get what you think you need, which you do need. Everybody needs like love, and biologically we all need connection. So one of the ways that if you didn't get cherished as a child, as a female, is to then go out and be codependent and sacrifice yourself to give other people what you think they want, so that your cup will be filled with love.
Which is fucking ironic, because it's that wounded feminine, maybe wound origin, but then she goes out in her wounded masculine, like doing shit, because it's...
Yes, because the wounded feminine can be covered by the wounded masculine to achieve in a society that likes achievement. I mean, I was totally wounded masculine, then wounded feminine, with the core center of divine feminine. Totally me.
One of the
I would resonate.
One of the dynamics that we talked about with another guest was this thing called the victim triangle. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's so pure victimhood in the bottom of the triangle is kind of powerlessness and really kind of shut down, which people don't necessarily stay in for very long. And then you kind of go into this
isn't one of them persecutor?
Yes, persecutor, but the other one is
the fixer.
The
savior?
Fixer, but I also savior.
Savior.
I think of martyr, but this to me is like the personification of what in my head is this idea of codependence, which is like sort of self-effacing. I don't have any boundaries. I'll do everything I can,
Yeah.
It's really funny. I was talking to a friend of mine, and her father is really in this mode in their family, who just like gives and gives and gives, and like has no boundaries, and is like doing this. Whereas I personally, when I am in my victim place, I will go to the persecutor. I will just fucking hate everybody. And I'm like, my friends always used to make fun of me for like riding a high horse. Here comes Nick on his high horse. Clippity clop, clippity clop.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Did they use coconuts?
Yeah. But just being like the judge. So like that, I don't
spam a lot recently, so it's hilarious.
So it's just interesting. So I wonder what that, I liked the idea. I vibed with everything you said about, that wounded feminine energy and about how that manifests, like you described. Yes. But I wonder over to the other side, into the prosecutor side, right? I wonder if that's like just wounded masculine then or something. I don't know how that works out then. Because I certainly know that I have like people pleasing and sort of like a martyrdom thing, which is like part of it, like an anxious attachment, which is like, especially in new relationships, I'll find myself being like, oh, hey, you like me, I like you, oh, what do I like, or what do I want to do? Whatever you want to do, like I'll just, as long as you're here, I'll do anything,
Yeah.
which is like that's definitely codependent. It doesn't have a lot of like structure in it. It's very mushy, wishy-washy, just because the primary thing, my central sun and my solar system, is like, I need love and affection, and just your proximity is going to like fulfill that for now,
Mm-hmm. So I liked what you said, that like maybe the persecutor is the masculine. And I'm just spitballing here because I've never thought about that before. But when I think of persecution, I think of like outward angry energy. And so that seems like, I mean, when you think about masculine and feminine, or men and women, like when women are struggling, they tend to like inner blame, and like throw themselves on a sword and like insult themselves. And when men are struggling, there's a tendency to go outward and blame and anger and like go outward. And so the persecutor is, in this triangle thing, is like outward energy, like I'm attacking. And so that kind of makes sense when I think about it. I just wanted to like share that. I don't know, see what you guys think of it, or if you have other ideas.
I like it.
It's really interesting. I agree with that. Like that is a very common thing I see too. Like women will more naturally implode. They'll collapse in instead of being angry, and men will more likely go to that place of frustration and anger and rage, like much more easily, because women, like a lot of women I coach, when they feel angry, they'll start crying. They won't express anger. And the men that I coach are more likely to be like, I'm so fucking pissed, I'm so angry, and I'm like, good for you, good, but I'm also encouraging my women clients to be angry as well.
And anger is always actually covering up another emotion.
Yeah. Despair.
But also I'm like, a really angry woman will definitely like stab you, and there's like Kali and destruction, and like that's also feminine. So it gets a little tricky, I think, to really define, because like at like its very base, like smallest molecule, I feel like masculine and feminine energy is like so inseparable. At some points you're kind of like, I don't know if that's masculine or feminine, but usually in the world of emotion, or anything like emotional, is like more feminine, and anything more structure, staccato, action based, consciousness based, organizing, that kind of thing is masculine. But then it's interesting, because it's like, how do you talk about certain qualities or emotional qualities as being wounded masculine? Because it's almost like a wine glass isn't going to stab you. Like a person, like an angry person, or like, I don't know, like someone with a knife will stab you, that's feeling emotional, but just the structure without emotion isn't necessarily going to stab you. So I think there's some creative license when it comes to how you're describing those things. I would say, I don't know.
And I remember just one of the things she talked about, this was another guest, Lynn, in the triangle. Just in victim energy anyway, like going from being sort of the martyr to the persecutor, down to like powerlessness and victim, you can move around that triangle very quickly. So it really depends on like the situation and what energy is sort of happening. It's like you can ping pong around and do, like embody all three aspects very quickly in like succession, and move around in there. So, but the core of it is just like coming from a wound, and being in a wounded place. And that is sort of the kernel that's, driving all the stuff, whether it be through like a masculine or a feminine energy lens, or whatever is embodied at the time, So,
yeah.
Right.
I was going to ask you, if we can shift topics. So I know when I met you, you had your therapy practice, and you were also coaching, and you've recently just been coaching. I'd love to hear more about that, or if you have any thoughts, or just, I don't know, like reasons for doing so, and what the difference is for you.
So starting my therapy business, I had it for 9 years. So 9 years ago, I started that, and I'd never had a business before, and I had never witnessed somebody owning a business like in my personal circle. And I had a few other therapist friends who had like just started their practices. And so they really were able to help me. And there was a big learning curve with starting your own business. And I didn't know what the fuck I was doing at all. And I'm pretty sure I cried like once a week forever because there was so much stuff to learn. And then kind of about halfway through, maybe a third of the way into that business, I started the People Pleaser Recovery Roadmap program I mentioned, and started Soul Amplified, and was really like branching in this other direction and really being able to incorporate spirituality and what I had learned from my own spiritual awakening with other people's healing. And I started getting therapy clients just kind of naturally that were interested in spirituality, and that wouldn't come up like at the beginning of therapy, or even, you know, during like kind of the get to know you phone call I would have with people to figure out if we were a good fit. It would come up a few sessions in, then it was like this magical, like, oh, you're interested in spirituality. That's a thing I know about if you want that to be part of your therapy process. And then I kept growing and changing, and there started to be more of a mismatch with the type of people I was working with in my therapy practice and the amount of freedom that I had to help people in the way that I wanted to help them. Like I do energy work. I'm a Reiki person. There's all of these things that like aren't really okay to do in therapy, like strictly speaking. Right. But I'm really, really fucking good at energy work. I'm really good at helping remove blocks and, you know, aligning people's chakras and all these different things. And I just felt like I had discovered so much healing through those processes, but now I felt like I was kind of hamstringed by, well, what the therapeutic world says is okay and not okay to do. And so I kept getting more and more enjoyment out of my coaching business. And also the coaching world kind of has this whole perspective of, if you're going to have your own business, run your life the way you want to run your life and make your business the way you want it to make it so that it works around your life. But the therapy world has this perspective of make yourself available for your clients whenever they need it because they're in crisis.
Codependent.
And right. And not every single therapist does that. I love how much you just laughed. But and it's not like that's widespread and everywhere, but it was like, I don't want to live that life. And the coaching world has this emphasis on personal growth, you know, affecting your business and your life. And it's kind of all like your personal growth affects everything. And of course, the therapeutic world is also interested in personal growth, but there's like a different flavor to it. And I think that I also got really, really sick of insurance. Like I could complain for an hour. I could just complain for an hour. So we're just going to put a pin in that and just be like, fuck insurance, fuck insurance, fuck insurance. And I'm going to move on. And I was so sick of so many things that had nothing to do with the work I was doing with clients. But then also I was just like growing in a way that I didn't feel as connected to the type of clients I was getting. And I had done a lot of work on marketing myself to get the right kind of clients. And I had an intake process where I was only allowing myself to take on clients that were kind of what I identified as the type of client I would want to work with. And I was just getting to this point where I couldn't stay a therapist and be happy with who I was working with and the structure under which I was working. It just didn't feel good anymore to be in that therapeutic structure. And when the pandemic happened, I kind of had this download moment early one morning when I was half awake, and just this idea went through my head, and it said, close your office and take everything home. What did you say?
Just be a coach.
No, that's not what it said. It said, close your therapy office, get rid of the rent, move your business online, and do only online therapy, which caused like a lot of panic at home Like, my husband was not supportive of it. He was like, you're going to lose all your clients. I had done it by May. It was insane. And guess what? Everyone had to do online therapy. And my business stayed going. And then, you know, I closed it in June of this last year, July, whatever it was. But there was just these moments of like, I just have to take this opportunity and run with it. And that closing the business was one of them, but also moving the business home. I think just a couple seconds before I heard other therapists talking about doing that. And I was just like, I just need to do this. It's the right move for me. I like sold all this cool stuff that I had gathered in my office. It's like having big yard sales, get rid of it all.
What was like one of your cool items that you had? Did you have like a 8-foot unicorn statue or anything?
I had this set of chairs. They were club chairs. I got them at Target. They look like zebra print. I loved them. I loved them so much. I have a teal coffee table. It's like a 1970s oval teal coffee table, but I did keep it. And it's right here underneath this sand tray. You can't really see it. Oh, wait. There, you can sort of see it.
Nice.
Yeah.
You didn't have room for those zebra chairs?
No, there's not room in my house for zebra chairs. There wasn't room. So yeah, I got rid of the couch. I just kept some decorative stuff. And of course I kept my entire sand tray therapy collection, which is what that is right there.
Oh yeah, I've seen some of those on your Instagram.
Yeah. A whole other modality that I do.
So you fully transitioned to this other thing, and like, okay, how's it going?
So, I mean, I've got my podcast, I've got some retreats that I've held, and it wasn't like it was starting a new business. It was like, oh, now I'm just not running two businesses, because they had totally different back ends. The behind the scenes work of a therapy practice and a coaching business are totally different. And I was just sick of doing both of them. So, I mean, I did a few in-person retreats. I had found this yurt at a spa, like literally 5 minutes from my house. It was so random how I found it. It was like a friend of a friend started a spa in her backyard, and she decided to build a yurt, and I literally waited for her to be done with the yurt, and then went and looked at it in her backyard, and it was awesome and exactly what I needed, because I basically needed a little room that felt like a cozy living room where women could gather, like 10 to 12 women, and just like sink into something spiritual and ritualistic that was like a little bit witchy and a little bit therapeutic, and just a lot of connection. And we needed access to a bathroom. And like, that's so hard to find. Like, you can't like rent an Airbnb. Like, there's all these bedrooms I don't need. And like a conference center, okay, now that feels sterile and cold and everyone wants to run away. So happy to find this retreat place, and really, really good things happened there. And I'm going to keep using her. I don't have anything on the calendar for that right now, but I love that place.
Nice.
I love that place.
A good yurt.
Yes.
I love a yurt. The other thing that I was going to ask you about, because I saw on your Instagram page about like moon magic and like the divine, the feminine, and the period stuff.
Stuff.
Yeah, you got into the period stuff.
I've been into the period stuff for a while, but now I'm finally talking about it on Instagram.
Out of the closet with the period stuff.
Out of the closet with the period stuff. Also feeling like I knew enough that I had shit to say that would actually help people. I've been on a journey of understanding what is wrong with my own period for a very long time, because I would go months and months and months and not have one, which is really, really bad. It's like a really bad thing. And I was trying to understand it and trying to figure it out. And doctors aren't very useful. And because I'm in the spiritual world, you end up getting books recommended to you and you hear things. And it was like this random hodgepodge of like, well, I'm going to read this book by Alyssa Vitti on hormones, and I'm going to read these books by Lisa Lister that are on like living your cycle. And like, I learned that there are 4 phases to a woman's cycle. It's not just if you happen to have PMS, and then your period. There's actually 4 parts to it, and each of them has, you know, feminine or masculine energy is kind of more dominant. Each of them has hormones that are supposed to happen. What happens if those hormones get out of balance? A shit ton of stuff goes wrong with our uterus and all of our reproductive organs. It can cascade into like extreme exhaustion in the afternoon and adrenal fatigue, which is what I think I have, which is why I'm bringing that one up and I know about it. I basically like run out of energy for my day at 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It's like, I'm done. I can't do anything else. And so I'm doing all these things right now to like figure out how to balance the hormones more frankly, because of being in go mode for too long, being in my masculine mode, trying to have this super awesome career for too long. I burnt my adrenals out is what I think. Again, this is like a self-diagnosis. I'm actually getting testing done right now. I'm waiting to hear back on different things. So doing testing stuff. Yes. And I'm doing that with a naturopath if anyone's interested in like how to figure that out. But
Kim, you said the podcast that you listened to from ours, Kim Shaper, she and her team do a lot of hormone testing with their clients, so
yeah, when it comes to hormones, she like her knowledge base is like so, and she's super cool too. So like if you want,
she's very cool.
Wanted anybody to
nice,
kick
well, I'm
ideas
definitely
around with,
gonna finish listening to the episode that I've started.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool.
How well, now that you're saying all that, I'm like, holy shit. But isn't it interesting how there's like so many different ends to there's just so many different like pockets of life, especially when you're like, oh yeah, this thing is wrong, or there's like suffering here. There's like a million different things on the topic, and it's like you can put energy and focus and healing in this one area, and then it has like all these cascade or like ripple effects that just branch out in those other areas. And I'll bet that anyone really, like women specifically that struggle with codependence, do get heavily locked into their masculine overdoing, like running around and just not ever sitting and just overgiving, overdoing, not really feeling their feelings. Because I also had a really big issue with like burning out, and I think I burned out my adrenals because my eyebrows all fell out completely. So I'll bet that there's a lot like those things all overlap. If you think about it, like people that have autoimmune and trauma and highly sensitive people and insecure attachment, it's like if you were to just do a big chart with like a nexus, you would probably hit a lot of those topics would likely all be affecting the same people, because at the like underlying the core, when you have a dysregulated nervous system or a dysregulated system, then it's like your foot's on the gas going full speed ahead. You have no rest and relaxation. You're not able to replenish. And then your systems start going offline. Then you're not able to absorb nutrients, and it depends on your nutrient source. And then it's like things start going offline, and you start like, you're in straight up survival mode. There's no thriving. And it's like, if you have any kind of trauma, you're using up so many vitamins and minerals and resources that like just eventually you're fucked. Because like if it's a car, you can't just drive a car and have your foot on the gas and like not brake or not get an oil change. And that's kind of what happens to our bodies. Like we're not able to detoxify, and then the hormones go off, and this is happening and this is happening. And it's like when you're having all these symptoms, there's deeper issues.
I am not a good sleeper. And sleep is such a huge component of like balanced hormones for women. And of course, I've done no research on men's bodies because I am not a man, and I'm not trying to solve a man's body. I'm trying to solve a woman's body. So
similar.
It's important for men as well, but But I've learned that the liver is what detoxes our hormones. So it's one of the ways that estrogen actually leaves our body. And if we don't have a good liver function, then the estrogen can just end up running around our body. And so then we can have extra estrogen, which causes problems. So like if you're not going to the bathroom within 20 minutes of waking up, then you're not getting the estrogen that your liver processed overnight out of your body.
You mean numero dos?
Yes, number 2. If you're not going number 2, like really quickly after waking up, not within 5 minutes, but like, 20 minutes, an
In the
hour. It's
morning.
and this is
Yeah,
all
like
based
you
on
need to
things
have
that
your
I've read.
morning BM. You should
Yes.
have a daily deposit that happens early.
So it's not like, oh, it happens at 1 o'clock and I go once a day and it's fine. It's actually leaching estrogen back into your body potentially if that's not regulated. And I'm bringing this up about sleep because apparently our liver starts working at like 11 o'clock at night. So if you're a night owl, your liver isn't getting to fully process because you're not asleep. And that's totally me. So I've not been able to detox because I'm a fucking night owl. And even though I've known this for years, I've been working on it for years, like I don't prioritize it. It's like I can't get myself to do it regularly.
Yet.
Yeah, I agree with yet. I'm working on things. But it's just like,
it's been a challenge.
and that's just one thing in all of the stuff that I've read. That's like, oh my God, you put the pieces together and you're like, what is happening? And then if you have excess estrogen, I don't remember what happens with that, but that's not good. That throws things off.
Yeah, anyway. You get snakes coming out of your head and you start murdering people.
Potentially.
Like Medusa.
Yeah. I would be interested to know about sort of like the cycle because, okay, left to my own devices, I'm a night owl person too. So like for the last few months, we'll say, my thing is like on the weekends, I'm staying up till 4 a.m. every day. And then come Monday, I got to get up at 6, it's like, it just doesn't work very well. So it's like, something in my being or in my hormones or whatever it is, it's just like, I want to stay up at night. It seems like when I get more energy or something, it's like I come back alive, like at a 10 o'clock or something. And I get this extra like push. Right.
I suspect that just like with anything, we can have trauma around different times of the day. So if like your parents were around and they were like, super rigid, like authoritarian assholes, when they went to bed, you could have been like, it's my time to shine. Time. So, right. Yeah. So you're probably like, I can't wait for them to go to bed so I can do what the fuck I want. Because if I leave my room or I'm out during the day, like I'm a moving target. So let me hibernate until it's safe to come out. And because like, I remember my dad would wake up really early, and from when I was a young child, like, I mean, thankfully he traveled quite a bit, but when he was home, like he would have these like rageaholic type things that he would do. So like, he wasn't always the safest attachment figure, and my mom really wasn't either. So I was going to be a fearful avoidant one way or the other because neither of them were super safe. But what I did notice is like, I would avoid getting up early. I'd be like, fuck getting up early. I hate mornings. Like, fuck this, But more recently, I've been waking up really early, and I've had to regulate myself through letting it be okay to actually be a morning person. And I've also had clients that have had stuff with their parts where they would sleep a lot because like perhaps they had a parent who had some like mental illness or something that was being treated or untreated, and things that happen if you don't get that sleep. So it's like there's trauma and triggers also tied up, I believe, like with our sleep patterns. So you have to consider like the root of the resistance around like why you're having trouble sleeping. Is your body actually trying to keep you awake because there was some kind of threat that was happening at a certain time of night? Was nighttime not safe for you? Because at that point, a lot of people that are sexual abuse or abuse survivors would have someone coming into their room, and like that alone time in their bedroom is just not safe. So it's like, there's likely deeper layers of trauma that go around with sleeping, just like anything else, like with food, like with work, with money, like it's all like tied up into all those things. So it makes me think there's always like a deeper reason why we're not just all naturally, on the same circadian rhythm. And it may be that different people are different styles, but maybe it's really the other way around, where we have a natural rhythm and we're out of sync with it because of trauma. That's one of my theories.
I can dig it.
Yeah.
It's very contemplative. Yeah, you're making like, yeah, I like it.
Thank you.
Yeah. When I think about the sleep cycle that you're talking about, Nick, I think about cortisol levels. and that we're supposed to have a high level of cortisol in the morning and then it tapers off. But people who have the sleep cycle like you and I are talking about of staying up late. I'm not staying up till 4, but I relate to wanting to stay up late.
Right.
I like to stay up late too.
Like you get a spike in the evening. So you actually start out with not a lot of cortisol in the morning, so you're sluggish. Yeah. And then at night, it's like it's inverted. So then you'll get cortisol at night, and then it helps you wake up, and then you're suddenly like, oh, now I can get the things done. And I totally have that.
I think that's happened to me because it's like if like I will notice now that I'm getting up earlier, I'll get tired like earlier. So I'll start to get tired at like 9 or 10. But if I miss that window and I stay up like past 11:30, then I'm like what's going on? I'm a little Energizer bunny, like right around, like let's do this stuff. And I'm like, fuck, I'm lying in bed, like, you know, thinking about all these things. And I'm like, shit, I missed my melatonin window.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. One of the things I experimented with recently was getting off coffee. Like I've known that like my sensitivity to coffee specifically, because I don't feel like I'm that sensitive to other forms of caffeine, but coffee specifically, like I took a break and everything got better. I'm also doing some big giant cleansing now. So it's like my system is kind of all fucking out of whack. I don't know what's going on. But getting off the coffee was really interesting, and it was pretty good. It was good for my sleep cycle. It definitely got me out of this, especially the crash after work, and then also the re-energized around 11 or something. You know, that seemed to go down quite a bit until this week, where I decided to have some coffee. I've had a few cups of coffee, and it's like right back in it, and it was like, so I was like, okay. And I just know like the half-life of caffeine is 12 hours, you know, and especially if your adrenals, I know my adrenals, you know, because I have a nervous system that's like pretty freaked out a lot of the time, you know, and so it's like burning the candle on both ends. And then, you know, the half-life of caffeine is 12 hours, you know, so depending on like when I'm taking it during the day, all day long, you know, and it's like, oh, I didn't sleep enough, better have some more. It's just like, it puts me in this wackadoo sort of like up and down cycle that the harder I push it, the worse it gets, you know? So it's like taking that all back, removing stimulants from my body, you know, trying to like get to bed before 1 a.m., you know, actually get some decent sleep, you know, like, and you know, following a bunch of Kim stuff too, about following her on Instagram kind of more recently, you know, sleep is always like right in that, you know, hamburger stack of like the things you need to pay attention to. But it's just like, it is actually kind of tough. But like anything, it's like, well, if you just spend a lot of time, you do a little bit of research, do a little bit of experimenting, you can kind of nudge it more in the right direction, and then hopefully feel the downstream effects of what it is, just because I think it is like so fundamental. I think sleep is super fundamental. It's just finding ways to like crack that egg of like, you know, like how come I am not sleeping well? So for me, one of the big things is coffee, and I love coffee. Sucks. I want coffee. I can't have coffee.
Nick, just so you know, there are some herbal alternatives that supposedly sort of taste like coffee. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but I'm happy to share this with you.
Cocaine.
No, not cocaine. I don't know that would help your problem.
It's herbal. It's all
might make it worse. Yeah. What was I?
Chew the leaves.
Oh, I was going to say, so I suspect, like, I think it's also this way with everything, is it makes me wonder, like, which parts we allow to be in control of our, like, habits or behaviors. Because, like, when I think about staying up really late or eating certain foods, it's like adulting isn't really sexy, you know, like
very responsible.
Yeah. So yeah, it's like, that's lame, right? So if you think about like staying up late and doing those things, like those to me feel like teenager parts or younger.
Yeah.
Right. Like kid stuff. Cause like I have a 11-year-old nephew. Oh my God, trying to get him to go to bed. He wants to be up with the action. Like he wants to be up with everyone, but he needs to go to sleep. And so it's like these parts, the same parts that if you let them eat ice cream for dinner, they fucking would, you know? So I think it's like learning like which part of me have I kind of been blended with and allowed to run some of my routines that have actually been running my health into the ditch. Like, where have I been too passy or spongy in my boundaries for my inner children, where I need to move from this end of the pole of polarity? And obviously I don't want to go into a Thorian dickhead parent, but I want to find that authoritative, sweet spot, secure, nurturing parent that's like, honey, I understand you want to stay up and play Minecraft or Warcraft, StarCraft.
I know what's good for you.
Yeah. Or whatever you want to do, honey, it's fine. Do you want me to bring you some ice cream? Like finding that compromise with the nervous system to say, okay, this doesn't have to be a total bummer. You can stay up for 15 more minutes, but you need to get in bed, and then finding some routines or things that actually serve you that maybe don't feel sexy right away, but that you can celebrate. And then eventually it'll be like, oh, this feels so much better. I'm so glad I'm doing this now, kind of thing.
Right.
I like the way you put that.
Getting with the ladies in the yurt. I want to do that with
what?
I want to go to the yurt.
We're all going to go to the yurt.
Oh, the yurt. I thought you were saying you want to get with all the ladies in a year. I'm like, what?
Yeah. I mean, sure, that's
ladies
nice too.
Do you want to get
fine.
with, and why does it have to take a year?
All of them, Angela.
That's your timeline. 1 year, go.
1 year, do it all. You can be the next Chris Bale.
Okay.
Yes, now you're making me contemplate which parts of myself are the ones that want to stay up late, which I think is good for me to consider.
Well, yeah,
because I think about being like 16 or 17 and staying up late watching Jay Leno when my parents had gone to bed. That's always what it makes me think about.
But it might have been because during the day you were like fucking managing your parents' relationship, and once they went to bed, you were like, oh, I'm sweet Jesus, I'm off the clock now. Thank God. Let me watch some TV and relax. I don't know.
So I used that example, but that example didn't happen every day of my life.
Mm-hmm.
That was like weekly or less.
Well,
so
it's finding out what event was meaningful enough to create that kind of imprint on your system, that aspect of personality where you were like, you made a decision about bedtime, like not wanting to go to bed early. So there must be a really good reason why you're doing it, or that part of you is doing that, because it's all around like safety and protection. And like, there's always a good reason, even if we don't know it, because it's going on in our subconscious. So then it's like understanding the subconscious, and we can loop this back into, this is why it's important to investigate your feelings.
Yes.
Feelings are important.
Also,
origins are.
So we haven't talked about this yet, but I've thought about it in terms of epigenetics.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've thought about it epigenetically because for my dad, nighttime would have been very scary as a child. And I think for probably both of his parents as well, it wasn't a safe time. Nighttime felt safe to me as a child. Like bedtime there was all a routine, blah, 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 all of that. But for my dad, and there wouldn't have been that.
Yeah. And now
I wondered how much of his epigenetics is affecting me, and did I get that part of it? And do I have to heal that part that I got from him, even though I never experienced it? I've thought about that before.
It is interesting because I do definitely believe that there's like, this is sort of like Stan Groff, like Way of the Psychonaut territory, or even like Mark Wallen. It didn't start with you.
Yep.
So it's like the generational trauma, epigenetics, and we know that there are things. What did I miss?
I said I just finished Mark Wallen's course.
Oh, yes. Oh, okay. Fantastic. I haven't taken his course.
Cool.
Wow. Yeah. So, but this is what I'm curious about, because then I'm wondering, when in cases of like, we know that things are carried on the X and Y chromosomes, and then likely, yes, like through the DNA and epigenetics, of course, like all those switches on and off thing. But it's like, in my ignorance, I feel like if a person has generational trauma, we're doing things not knowing why we're doing things, because we have that imprint. So then it's like, how do you get access to that trauma? Or do you end up like having a part that you get from your parent, or is it something that you strictly understand from your own life experience in some way? You know what I mean? I guess my question is like, what's the way in if you have generational trauma?
So, okay, this is interesting because I just completed, like I said, the Mark Wallen training, but I also just completed one from Bonnie Badenoch. I don't know if you guys have heard from her.
Mm-mm.
I forget what the name of her type of therapy is, which is lame, but I forgot what it's called.
You mean
But
you're lame for forgetting, or the type of therapy is lame?
I'm lame for forgetting.
Oh,
She's not lame. She's awesome. Oh my God, I just forgot your question. Oh, what's the way in? What's the way
what's
in?
the way in?
Yeah.
Because
Okay,
if it's
so-
generational and it's something you can tie to you, then of course you can have an understanding of where to go.
Yeah.
But if it's something that you don't relate to, like as a
So
problem, or the origin.
Mark Wallen's training, his answer would be the answer is in your body's somatic response, and that's all the information you need, even if you don't know the story of what happened. Because
Right.
a lot of what he does a lot of questions in the beginning to get the history, and they're really specific questions, and he takes you through this whole process, and there's a traumagram involved. But then the work that he does with you and was training on was somatic work and a process to do somatic work. And even like online, he was talking to us about taking like a pair of flip-flops, and those are going to represent where your mother is standing, and putting her in a distance from you across the room that feels a safe distance so that you have room and space to breathe. Maybe if you felt suffocated by her neediness, and then like putting a tie around your body, and that represents the boundary of you, where you end and your mother begins, or whoever the person is you're talking about. And so he'll do methods like that that are very like symbolic based, but also really feeling it in your body and just allowing it to move through it, whatever it is. But he also, I mean, I don't even know it well enough to describe it, but there's like, it's basically some attachment stuff with mom, but then also you can align with other members of your family from your family tree that were basically like cut off and no one talks about them. Like you did something so awful, we're never going to talk about you again. But then later on in the family tree, someone can unknowingly, like unconsciously align with them, but then keep doing all of their behaviors. So it's, you're not doing it because it's conscious and you want to do it. You're doing it because you're like honoring this person that was basically like out of the family.
So like the family is actively like resisting or shunning those behaviors, and what they resist, someone must carry on or persist. So it's sort of part of an energetic.
And there's an actual term for it that I can't remember right now because it was so intense. I was like fire hosing, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't take all this in. Wow. And then Bonnie Badenoch's answer to, what was the question again?
Yeah, how do you like, what's the way in? And like,
what's the way in?
Yeah, you
her answer is like, again, it's a very similar answer, but her process is different. It's just follow. Like basically it's somatic work where you're following what the body is experiencing and feeling and honoring that. And then it really all comes, both of them are coming back to somatic work, but their methods are like really different.
Inheriting stuff that you don't necessarily have like a conscious understanding of, because it's like in your hardwiring, or it's like in your behavioral like inheritance. It's like a behavioral inheritance, and it's like you doing shit that you don't know why you're doing it, or you having feelings and not knowing why you have feelings about that, which is really interesting. So if you can't get the conscious and subconscious mind to actually have agreement, like I do think that the somatic work is really huge for that, which also goes back to team feeling.
Well, it's just like, and then doing all the somatic work I'm doing, it's like the thing that you realize is like you'll stumble across things where there's a lot of energy, right? That's like the hallmark of like, oh, there's a lot of energy here. Okay. It didn't come with an instruction manual, but it's really cool to hear about other people who are figuring out like symbolic ways to tie the things together and to actually tell the stories about how these things came through. It's like, it's like, oh, all these people decided it was going to be this way. Well, it's like, well, shit, it doesn't actually work that way. So we can try to put it out of our heads, just like our own internal energies, it's like, oh, we can disassociate from them and try to push them down in our bodies. that doesn't mean it went away, right? Like our family could have decided we're going to shun this person. That shit didn't go away, right? It's going to come
Exactly.
through the
It
system.
doesn't.
You know
Right.
what, though? So I'm thinking a little bit about this, and I do think all roads lead to God, all roads lead to Rome, or whatever the fuck, God. So the only way into healing truly isn't just through like the feminine or emotional thing. You can actually, like, you know, a lot of people that come to me are stuck up in their heads because being in their bodies was not safe. And so, like, I think that some people that offer really great processes are like Byron Katie and like the work, because you actually have the worksheet where you're using the mind to be like, I'm creating suffering. So I do think that there's other ways in, but I do think that I just feel like eventually you have to do the emotional work. Like it's like, again, the masculine, feminine, like it's really inseparable. One is causing the other is causing, you know, they're together. So I just feel like you can't have the emotions without having the consciousness piece, because without the consciousness witnessing those emotions are alone, and you are solely identified with those emotions, and therefore you are just fucking in it. You're without help, you're suffering, life sucks, like you just are those emotions. Like I am depression, I am grief, I am this.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing is like, if you're just pure consciousness without the emotional aspect, then life is fucking boring. Nobody wants that.
Amen.
Right?
I also question how conscious can a person be when they can't process their own feelings, because then they're lacking in what they can be conscious
process.
about.
We're just choosing not to.
Say that again.
Oh, we're conscious. We're just choosing not to.
Mm.
See, I'm the embodiment of pure consciousness. No emotion.
Well, so Nick, but I want to ask you quickly, because like you really like Mickey Singer, Michael Singer's stuff.
Right.
And what would you say? Because his is a much more like consciousness witnessing, you know.
Yeah, because his whole process was like he just meditated like all the way, you know, until he just became pure bliss or something, you know. But you know, he couldn't stay there. Nobody can stay there. You can't stay in pure like samadhi, just like oneness consciousness. No, we live in duality, right? We live in the rules of the road, which is our
human experience,
polarity, right? Which
contrast.
Includes our masculine and feminineness. And so, so first he goes to pure consciousness, lives there for a while, okay, but he can't stay there. So then he has to come back down into reality. And in reality, he had to surrender to whatever life brought him. And so he talked a lot about like having lots of battles inside, like, I don't want to do that, I don't want to do that. But that was part of his learning and his journey, was actually surrendering to these things. And so a lot of the things that came to him later on in his life when he stopped meditating were tons of feelings and emotion and the whole gamut of our, you know, dynamic human experience, right? Which includes all these things. So if you're strong in your consciousness, like, which is, I think, like a lot of Eastern shit, you know, is you know, we're just going to meditate out and we're going to go pure consciousness and just try to push us all away, all the suffering away, you know, but that's not very dynamic.
I feel like a lot of that ends up being like a bypass sort of thing, whether you intend it to be that way or not, because I think there's like two poles. There's like there's like heaven and earth, right? Yeah. And it's like, there's the space in between. And if you try to, like, if you're solely stuck in the ground, then you're very much focused on, I feel like
and I think you can do it. I think that there's probably a decent place to live in that. I'm not saying that, like, you know, just because you do that, or if that's like the tool that you rely upon to base your life off of, or your own experience, you know, there's so many ways to do, you know, slice this onion, you know, but I think somewhere in the middle, mixtures of both, having like good relationships with both sides of the coin, you know, is maybe the more creative way, right? If you can have juice and you can have consciousness, you can have the glass and you can have the wine, you know,
right? Which is like, the party. Like, let's have a party. So it's like, I don't want to say that it's one or the other. I would say it's an integration of both. And my video is frozen, but I'm still recording. So anyway. Hopefully it will unfreeze.
Well, I can see you moving.
Oh, you can? I can't see myself moving.
Oh, I see you moving.
I see you moving.
Cool. I see me moving now. Yeah, because I think, I truly think it's not either or, because if we get too mired in like the 3D, like humanness of like, this is the way life is, and this is like, it's almost like being mired in the past, or being anchored to the past. If you're too much in like, I don't know, it's not exactly the now moment, but the current manifestation of everything up until this point is now past. That's what I mean. But if you're too much into like the heavens and you're detached, then you're really not taking any action either. So it's like, it's a marriage of both. I just feel like if we really want relationship, and we want like to have fun in the party, like it's both. It's the wine and the glass, the wine glass and the wine, both. So, and I think there's different ways in. So if one does have resistance to the emotional journey, while I think you can't avoid it forever, I do think that there are other processes that you can use. Like you were talking about, Vanessa, is just like keeping it light, and whatever you said, like your method was with the teenagers, like you were just like, talking about things that are like irreverent or maybe not very important. And then you get to talk about what's important, just in having that.
It was just trust building.
Yeah. So, anyway, I was just thinking about that whole thing. Cool. I feel like we should do another podcast.
About
Not
what?
right now, like some other
I'm down.
But anyway, anything else? I feel like we've kind of been on for a while.
I mean, I have so many things to say about everything, but that's a whole new topic, probably.
That's why I was thinking, like, this was a really interesting conversation, like where it went. So I was just like, it would be fun to do another podcast.
Yeah, I'd love that.
What's the name of your podcast, Vanessa?
The Soul Amplified podcast.
The Soul Amplified
podcast.
Do you still do the Yo Bitch one?
I don't do Yo Bitch anymore. We shut it down. Yeah, me and my BFF had one called Yo Bitch for a hot minute, and it was really cool, and we really liked it, but she just didn't have time anymore. So we wrapped that
website,
one up.
The Soul Amplified.
Say what? Sorry.
Your website is The Soul Amplified.
The website is soulamplified.com.
Okay.
And that's the podcast. Instagram is Soul Amplified. Like really committed here. Everything is Soul Amplified.
Soul Amplified across the board.
Branding.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Branding.
I know.
So currently are you accepting one-on-one clients?
Yes, I am accepting one-on-one clients for coaching, and I have a mini coaching package as well, which I'm glad to talk to people about. But I actually wanted to tell people that I'm going to be offering the Crush Your Codependence for sale again. So that's coming up in January. I don't know when this is airing, but you can check that out on crushyourcodependence.com. Angela is one of the people that I interviewed about codependence. There's like 10 interviews, I want to say. It's $47, $49. It's somewhere in there. You get to own all of them.
It was, I watched quite a few. They were pretty good. I thought
they were amazing. I had a breath worker on. I had several people on talking about the nervous system and trauma. There was just, you learn a ton. I learned a ton, and I know the stuff. It was fascinating. Yeah. So a little bit of like alternative healing practices to help people manage the trauma, but then also like learning about how trauma affects you and how to deal with codependency stuff. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So that's out there now too.
Cool. Yeah, this will drop like next week, so that'll be
okay. Perfect.
Yeah, we'll stick all the links there in the description for all your stuff. And Vanessa, it was cool to have you on. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
It was great to be here. This was awesome. Nick, you're so cool. I hadn't met you yet, but I'm so happy I have.
Yeah, likewise.
We get a lot of positive feedback. People like Nick.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Actually, you know what Kim said, Kim Shaper, she's the hormone expert. She was like, she loves Nick and I together because there's something like, I don't know, she said there was something about like our energy together that was really nice. So we were like, appreciate that.
I agree with that.
A lot. Cool. Thanks.
We're like peas and soup. I'm the peas.
Pea soup. I'm the pea. All right. Bye, everyone. Thanks for listening. As usual, we love your comments. And if you have suggestions, of course, and, you know, maybe we'll pivot this into something in the future where we do some live coaching. Wouldn't that be incredible? All right. Bye, everyone.
Later.